This is going to be my ranking of all 9 episodes of HBO's The Last of Us, starting with episode 1, When You're Lost in the Darkness, all the way to episode 9, Look for the Light. I'm just going to immediately start and just get into it. Episode 1, immediate A tier. This episode was fantastic. You get to see the relationship of Joel and his daughter Sarah, which was not something that you got to see in the game very much. In the game, it's really late. Joel comes home from work. Sarah gives him his birthday present. She falls asleep. Joel puts her to bed, and then the world just like explodes. And you don't really see much of Sarah. Versus in the game, you get like an extended like 30-40 minutes with them to see their actual relationship and how it really blossoms. Versus in the game, you don't really get that luxury. It's just kind of like, oh, this is his daughter. This is his driving force. This is why he is the way he is in the game. Versus the show, you get to see Pedro Pascal's incredible performance of the scene where his daughter gets shot, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. It's more heartbreaking in the show than it is in the game, in my opinion. It is a perfect beginning episode as you get to see the events leading up to it, you get to see their day-to-day life, and it introduces the main characters, that being Joel, Sarah, Ellie, Tommy, and Marlene. Those are like the main characters of the show, with Sarah being slightly minor. But it is a fantastic first episode, immediate A tier. Episode 2, Infected, I'm going to give an S tier. I thought this episode was really good. It is the death of Tess. It's when you first get to see the clickers. It's when you see how the infection spread. They show that it started from a like yeast and like bread making factory in Indonesia, which is not something that you got in the game as well. A lot of the beginning episodes of The Last of Us kind of show like how certain things happened in both the game and the show, and it's really cool to see how everything like really went down. And it's just an overall great episode in my opinion, and there was tons of action. The first episode also had a lot of action, but I just really liked episode 2. Episode 3, A Long Time, is also an A tier. This episode was fantastic. It doesn't focus on Joel and Ellie really at all, except for the first like couple minutes. It is much more focused on Bill and Frank's relationship, which is not something that you saw in the game like at all, because by the time you see Frank, he has committed suicide, but you can see that Bill is like deeply like affected by it, which in the show it is very much different, as Frank has what I believe is cancer and asks Bill to pretty much overdose him with pills, and Bill cannot go on without Frank, so he also overdoses by putting a bunch of pills that they crushed up in their wine. They also got to grow old together in the show, which is again not something that happened in the game. Bill is very different in the show than he is in the game. In the game, he gets Joel in a trap, saves Joel from Infected and the trap, then threatens to kill Joel if he doesn't explain what's happening, all within the span of pretty much 5 minutes. Bill is much tougher and much like gruffer in the game than he is in the show, but honestly it's a welcome change to see a completely different side of a character that we didn't get to see in the game. So that's why I give episode 3, A Long Time, a definite A tier. Episode 4, Please Hold My Hand, I'm gonna give a B tier. There wasn't anything that I disliked about this episode, I just didn't like it as much as the first 3. It was really cool though, as you got to see the first like raiders, and you got to see like human enemies that Joel and Ellie have to face. It is very there's a very big mix-up in the show versus the game. In the game, after you leave Bill's town, you go to Pittsburgh, versus in the show, you never go to Pittsburgh. You just hear about it in, I believe, episode 8. In episode 4, instead of going to Pittsburgh, Joel and Ellie, they go to Kansas City, and you see like the raiders there that would have taken place of the Pittsburgh Raiders. You do see a very small nod to Henry and Sam, which show up here in episode 5, which I'll be rating obviously next. And that's really just my rating for episode 4. Very good episode. I just didn't like it as much as the first 3 episodes. Now, episode 5, this is where I was at. This is a immediate S tier, no doubt about it. This episode was incredible. There was a mix-up with them making Sam deaf, but I honestly thought that was really cool. It added a whole new layer of how Henry has to communicate to his brother. It also let Henry pretty much weasel his way into forcing Joel and Ellie to help them, because there's a part where Henry comes up with a plan and Joel does not like it at all, and he's like super against it and he doesn't want to do it. But then Sam, being deaf, writes down on not a chalkboard, it's like pretty much like a pen and paper that is like erasable, and he pretty much asks, are they going to help them? And Henry just takes the opportunity and says yes, and Joel can't even be like, hey, I said no, because Sam's deaf so he can't hear him. So that was really cool. And this had the biggest, in my opinion, besides episode 9, action set piece. You get to see the badass bloater, which was incredible, and it's so cool. It takes one of the rebel raiders heads and does exactly what it does in the game, where it grabs the top of your jaw and the bottom of your jaw. It just pulls and it rips the dude's head off of his body. It was awesome and gruesome and everything I would have wanted out of an episode. It's a top tier episode. It's so good. Episode 6, Kin, I'm going to give a A tier. The performances in episode 6 between Pedro Pascal being Joel, Bella Ramsey being Ellie, and Gabriel Luna being Tommy were incredible. There's so many like heart-touching moments where you see like Joel and Tommy, like they get upset at each other because Tommy says he's going to be a father, which is why he can't bring Ellie to the Fireflies, because Joel wants Tommy to bring Ellie to the Fireflies because Joel can feel him getting attached to Ellie, and that's his biggest fear, is he's going to get attached to Ellie and something's going to happen to her and he's not going to be able to protect her, and it's just going to be absolutely devastating to him if something happens to her at this point, because he's just so attached to her and it's pretty much his daughter at this point. He would do anything, he would kill anybody, which in the end he does kill anybody that tries to stop him from protecting Ellie. This episode was fantastic. You get to see the scene in the cabin that you saw in the game, where they really have like a heart-to-heart moment where Joel's just trying to explain to Ellie that he's not trying to get rid of her because he doesn't want her. He's trying to get rid of her because he's not sure if he can protect Ellie anymore. But Ellie didn't hear that part of the conversation because she eavesdropped in on Tommy and Joel talking about it, and she just heard Joel saying, I want to get rid of her. She didn't hear the reasons why. And at the end of the episode, as it happens in the game as well, Ellie does end up going with Joel, and they make it to the university, which was incredible. And Joel still does get injured, which I wasn't sure if he was going to or not, because it doesn't happen till the very end of the episode, literally the last like 3 minutes of the episode. In the game, he gets pushed off a balcony and falls onto a chunk of like metal and rebar, and the rebar goes through like his chest essentially. In the game, he doesn't fall off the balcony. He's fighting a guy with a baseball bat, and he kills the guy, but the baseball bat breaks and the handle gets stuck in his like abdomen, like his lower like chest. And instead of doing what, you know, you're not supposed to do when he gets stabbed, he takes it out and then he tries to keep moving once he's on the horse, but he passes out. So it was just an overall incredible episode that covered every single beat that they needed to cover. Episode 7, Left Behind, I'm going to give a C tier, and the only reason why I'm giving it a C tier is, honestly, I kind of wish it deviated a little bit. which I know is a weird complaint coming from somebody that loves video games and loves The Last of Us, and usually that's what you want in an adaptation or a show of like a game. You usually want it to be beat for beat. This happens, this happens, this happens, like it did in the show. But all of these episodes deviated just a tiny, tiny bit. Except for Left Behind. Left Behind was probably the most spot-on episode of the entire show. Like, beat for beat. So it was a little, like... It's not a bad episode at all. It was just a little, like, sad to see that there was nothing new that happened in the episode that I didn't know was gonna happen. I knew who was gonna die. I knew when it was gonna happen. I knew why it was gonna happen. So that's my reasoning for giving it a C tier. Again, it was still a really good episode, and you get to see Ellie's relationship with her friend Riley, which tragically ends with Riley being bitten and Ellie shooting her, which you don't find out till the very end of the show. But the only reason why I'm giving it a C tier, like I said, is it doesn't deviate, so I kind of knew everything that was going to happen before it happened, versus all of the other episodes had small variations that was like, oh, there's that. But something I did like, though, was all of the Easter eggs. The Easter eggs were incredible in this episode. So that's episode 7, getting a C tier. Episode 8, I'm going to give an A tier. A lot of the episodes in this show were really, really good. This episode followed the game very closely, with small deviations. You see Troy Baker, who played Joel in the game. He plays James in the show, which was cool. And I can also only hear him as Joel, which is slightly concerning to me, because the entire time I'm like, that's just Joel. That's all I could hear. But very, very good episode. You get to meet David and the cannibals. It happens in the snow, and you get to see like combat in the cold weather, which was really cool. Something I wish that a lot of zombie shows and just like shows that cover heavy topics like apocalypse in general was use the snow more often. I think it's really cool getting to see like somebody kill something and just like the blood splatter against the snow. It was something I wish The Walking Dead did, that they did like one episode. But this isn't about The Walking Dead. This is about The Last of Us. This episode was awesome. It follows it very, very closely. Honestly, almost beat for beat. But like you get to see the cannibals, like I already said. You get to see Ellie breaking David's finger. You get to see them going to try to go chop up Ellie, and then she says, lift up my sleeve, and you're going to see I'm infected. And now you are too, because Ellie got bit. Ellie didn't get bit. David got bit by Ellie on the hand, so David is infected. And you get to see their fight that you have in the game in the steakhouse, where it's like burning and he's coming after you with the cleaver / machete for the game, cleaver for the show. And it was just awesome. And then there was a really heavy part of the episode, which if you saw it, you'll know what I'm talking about, right at the end, right before Ellie slashes David's face to ribbons with that machete. And then at the end, when she runs outside and Joel comes up behind her and grabs her to try to calm her down, Ellie immediately starts fighting back and is freaked out because she thinks it's one of the cannibals. But when she finally realizes that it's Joel, and Joel says, it's me, baby girl," which was his nickname for Sarah, it was a really touching moment that was really cool to see. And it's just a top tier episode. And the final episode, episode 9, Look for the Light, I'm giving an S tier, because this episode, I've seen a lot of things just today alone that it was a good episode but not a great episode. But this is my tier list, and I get to rate it how I want to rate it. And I thought it was a fantastic finale for a fantastic show of a fantastic game that they adapted perfectly. Episode 9 covers the final chapter, the summer chapter of the game, and it was awesome. You get to see how traumatizing the winter was for Ellie. It completely changed her character. Throughout the entire show, right before the winter chapter, she is so talkative, and she just keeps cracking jokes, and she doesn't shut up. which is fine. That's her character. While Joel is the, you know, very cold and, like, nothing really affects him kind of guy. And he just wants Ellie to chill out. But at the end of both the game and the show, Ellie is very spaced out, and you can tell that she's completely different after the winter. And they pretty much swap positions. In the beginning, Joel is the one that doesn't talk, and Ellie's the one that doesn't shut up. And in this, Joel's the one that doesn't shut up, and Ellie's like very quiet and cold and doesn't really talk much. But you get the giraffe scene, which was incredible, which I kind of had a feeling they were going to adapt. That's like one of the biggest parts of the game. You get to see Joel's fight through the Firefly Hospital, which really had me feeling a certain kind of way, because that part always takes me like a couple tries, and I just saw him gun through all the soldiers in like 5 minutes, and I was like, why can't I do that? But it was a incredible episode. You also, at the very end, you get a cameo. You can't see her face, but if you look in the credits, you can see Laura Bailey, who played Abby in Last of Us Part 2. She played one of the nurses. It was actually, I believe, this nurse right here. I believe that was Laura Bailey. She was one of the nurses operating on Ellie, and it was just a incredible episode. You get to see like their like shifts and characters, and you get to see everything that needed to be adapted was adapted down to a T. Perfect episode, and it was just an all-around perfect show. And that's my ranking of all 9 episodes of The Last of Us. As you can see, I didn't ever use the D, E, or F tier because there wasn't a need to, because none of the episodes were like terrible. Like I said, the only reason I gave episode 7 a C tier was just because it was predictable, which again is a good thing, but I kind of wish they deviated just a little bit, so it kept me not knowing exactly what was going to happen next. But fantastic show, and that does it. But I just wanted to say one more thing. The critical acclaim that this show has gotten is what so many other video games could have gotten. Like the Halo show, I'll use that for example, or the Resident Evil show, which I am still salty about. Those shows could have gotten the Last of Us treatment, which is where they were taken care of. They had people on the staff that cared about The Last of Us, that cared about the IP they were turning into, except they would just give it to a company that had people that didn't care about it, that were just like, oh, it's a big video game IP, it'll do well, and then they change things and make it terrible, and then it doesn't do well, and then they're confused at why it didn't perform well. And then you have stuff like The Last of Us that was cared about. You could see there was compassion. All of the actors cared about the roles they were playing. You had Neil Druckmann, the creator of the game, as one of the directors of the show. So if there was something that he didn't like, it wasn't gonna happen. It was going to happen as him and Craig Mazin had wanted. And it was just the best adaptation that we could have gotten of a show, of a game turned into a show. This is the best case scenario, and there's a reason why all of the episodes are highly rated, and there's none of them, like by IMDb, that are all very highly rated, and why none of them have like huge flaws in them, or you're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Why did that happen? It's all, oh, this all makes sense, and it's all for a good reason. And that's just my little mini review that I wanted to throw in at the end. But if you like this, let me know down below. Like, comment, subscribe. If you want me to do more rankings, I will gladly do so. I'll do them on pretty much anything that I'm well versed in. So if I do like the Resident Evil games, I wouldn't mind doing that. Just video games in general, characters, The Walking Dead, anything. This was fun to make. I enjoyed it. So if you want me to do any more, let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.